Good afternoon. Thanks very much. I'm super excited to be here. Let's jump in. Yeah, I work at Intercom. I don't know how many of you have heard about this company. Maybe some of you will. I will speak a little bit about it in the process. And I work as a design manager. Half of my responsibility is making sure that designers are happy and growing, achieving their career goals. And half of it is actually working on products and making sure that we ship products of great quality. And I think it's a nice balance. I really like it. Before that, I've been working at Yandex, which you probably have never heard of. It's one of the biggest Russian internet companies. Some people say it's like the Google of Russia. I think it's also Spotify of Russia, maybe Uber of Russia, maybe Amazon of Russia, to some extent. Not everything, though, because social networks are a completely different field. And I worked there I started as a product designer. When I was leaving a company, I was running the entire design team. So it was a fantastic journey. But today we're going to speak a little bit about bots, and let's start with humans first. You can see some humans here in this slide. When we talk to each other, there are lots of ways for us to do so. More and more often today, we use different messaging tools for that. These are in particular the ones that I use. It's also interesting that I intentionally put Instagram and Snapchat there, even though they maybe not, like you may not think of them as messaging tools, but I've heard that people use them to communicate directly. I've tried to use Snapchat. I, to be honest, don't get it at all. I'm probably too old for that. But there are people who use it. There are people who use it as a messaging tool. And then when we speak within the company, when we work together, there are also a whole lot of tools for us. And in one of the previous talks, there was a great collection of all tools that we use to speak. But what if I'm a person and I need to speak to the company? This is where things get complicated. Because usually, if you just send an, I don't know, try to contact customer support of an airline or bank or insurance company, you will probably need to fill a form, and then you will get an email that will say, thank you very much, your ticket number is 456357, don't reply to this email, we'll get back to you in 2 days. And you feel like you are just a little piece of sand in front of this giant corporate machine, and you can't really communicate to them. And within the company, there's also a whole lot of different things happening. And more often, I see that friends of mine will even sometimes when they need to talk to a company, they will post on Facebook, like, does anyone know someone from that company? I want to speak to them. And they try to speak to a person within the company rather than contacting support. So this is what we are trying to fix. This is where Intercom comes from, and we are building tools for businesses to speak to people, and we want this communication to be really simple, really friendly, the way we speak to each other, using messaging tools, if this is how we speak today, just simple, personal, and fun. That's our mission. This is why we exist. Other than making money, we want to make internet business personal. So now, today, I'm going to speak about 5 different things, 5 stories, and they're all in some ways connected to bots and how we worked with bots for the last year and a half. Let's see. The first thing that I think is important for every designer is to look into the past. When you start working on something, make sure that you know what people do before. How people solved the same task before. Before the technology was there, before the company was there, how did we do that? And we did this exercise for business communication, so let's see how different technologies in the past changed the way we communicate and what came out of this. One of the interesting technologies was a telephone. And when it was invented, oh, it was like magic. You suddenly can speak to someone and hear their voice, even though they're very far away. And that was in the 19th century. And Alexander Graham Bell, as we know, invented it. And of course, businesses adopted it. Businesses were extremely excited. They started to use telephone. And what happened then? They started to scale it. They started to build all these things that I have in the slide here. They wanted to scale it, and they left us people in the cold. So it's no longer personal. You have to wait in line. You might sometimes have some robotic menus. And it came to the stage where we almost stopped picking up our phones. Like when I get a phone call from an unknown number, I will most likely ignore it because I'm really, I can't speak usually. I'm just in a meeting or I don't know, I'm at work. I don't want to speak to people who I don't know. So that's telephone. Then email was also fantastic, exciting things. Finally, businesses were able to send messages to people. And one of the most successful emails in the world in history was probably the one that Gary Turek of DAX sent in 1978. And that's a little screenshot of this email. He messaged 400 potential clients. And that email resulted in 13 million worth of sales. So it was probably really the most successful email in history. Also, Gary used to become known as the father of spam for that. And then businesses started to adopt this. Like businesses are doing it today. Again, they optimized it up to the point that we had to build technology to protect ourselves from email. We have all these things that are on the slides because emails are no longer personal and sometimes even not relevant. And then websites. Again, a totally magic thing, and if you think about it, finally you can be present online, you can be accessible from anywhere in the world, 24/7. That was magic. The first thing ever sold online was a CD. And it was in 1994. And the next day, New York Times put up this article, a screenshot of which is here. And as you can see, the title of it was, "Attention shoppers, internet is open. Now you can buy and sell things online." And we all know what happens next. In 1994, a guy called Jeff Bezos launched a website which was called Amazon.com. And that was the start of what it is today. A year later, Pizza Hut were the first company who enabled us to order food online. You could fill a form, and then a pizza will be delivered to your home. That's magic. But again, over time, businesses started to optimize it, and they optimized for clicks. Now, when you browse some website, they don't treat you as a human being. They don't treat you as a person. They treat you as a set of cookies or some behavioral data. And they just try to optimize for how you come there and what you might do or might not do, but they don't treat you as a human. So that's interesting. And then the messaging came. And messaging probably is the only technology in this line which tries to bring personal back. It started long ago in 1844 when Samuel Morse sent the first message via the telegraph. But then 150 years later, we've seen a rise of messaging apps. It probably was started by ICQ, but then there were many, many others, like AOL, MSN Messenger, Kakao Chat, we all know them. And they became super popular, especially in 2011, which was a very unusual year because many things happened during this year. First of all, Apple introduced iMessage, which maybe was just a teeny step away from SMS, but a very important step. And then in the same year, WeChat, a Chinese messenger, introduced apps. So you can now not only use it for chat, but also do transactions within the chat. And you can, for example, buy tickets to the movie, or order a taxi, or buy airline tickets, or anything else. And then the same year, Facebook has split their messenger from their core app. And also Intercom was launched the same year. And maybe this is a good time to talk to you about what Intercom is if you haven't seen it. And probably the tip of the iceberg is actually the messenger that people use to speak to the companies. If you come to some of the websites, like, for example, a very familiar, hopefully, tool here, Framer, you can see this little blue dot in the right corner, and that brings up our messenger, and you can start chat to people behind Framer. There are also different apps here, these cards that you can use for different things. They build it for themselves, but you can also open it, and it's then just a chat. It's normal messenger. You can type something there. You can drag and drop files. You can go away from this site and then get back, and the chat will still be here. The history will be here, so it's a messenger. And that's a messenger on the side. It can also be on mobile. Here, for example, an app in the bottom left corner, 10% Happier. It's one of my favorite apps for meditation. And when you launch it, it looks pretty much like all other meditation apps. It has different courses, it has singles, but it also has a tab which is called a coach. And if you click coach, it opens our messenger, and you can then chat to real life, like real humans, meditation coaches. If you have any questions, you can ask, and I think that's pretty amazing. So while it's there, yeah, I don't want to see how we are typing this. As we all know, messaging exploded. And messengers took over social apps, if you look at the messaging audience. But it looks like the technology is almost approaching its limits. In a way, people want to chat more, and people are chatting more and more, and people want to chat to businesses the way they do with friends. But for businesses, it is pretty expensive. First of all, people want to chat to businesses in real time. And we know that from our own data. We know that if people are actually chatting on the website, they're 82% more likely to convert. Even if they just had one chat message, it still increases the conversion. But if they had a meaningful conversation, a real one, there's a massive increase in conversion. So people want to chat to businesses in real time. But for businesses, it is pretty expensive. They need to then scale it. They need to, I don't know, hire maybe thousands of folks who will be replying to these chat messages. So what do we do about that? This is probably where there is some room for opportunity for the next chapter. And as you can probably guess, this is where bots came in. And we at Intercom, to be honest, were extremely skeptical about bots in the first place. Maybe we were even cynical. Because you all know how it happens. With every new technology, there is a thing which is called a hype cycle, when initially there are some expectations, like when a technology emerges, there is a peak of inflated expectations, everyone is super excited, starts to believe it's a future, and then there is usually a disillusionment, and people see that actually technology breaks in many ways, and then slowly over time it goes to normal. With bots, this hype cycle was, I think, a bit different. This is how I think it looked with bots. The excitement was off all charts. It was crazy. People really said bots are the new apps, bots are the new everything. And then as well as disillusionment, it was also terrible. And we were super skeptical at all. But I think now things start to improve. And we finally start to understand where the bots work, where they don't, and how to use them. And especially if we think our area, communications between businesses and customers, in sales, marketing, or support in multiple different use cases, this is where we think bots are actually useful. They are available 24/7. They don't make mistakes. You can scale them. They don't need salary. They're predictable, dependent. So there are many things that are good about them. But of course, there are lots of problems with them as well. So imagine in this case with Framer. When we started chatting to them, they can't reply to you in real time. They don't monitor all the chats. They will get back to you during the day. So it'd be good to inform you. And if you can get immediate response, for example, from a bot, maybe a bot can come to the conversation and say, hey, Framer will reply in a day. And maybe, meanwhile, leave your email, and they will get back to you over email, so you don't need to sit there on the site waiting for them. This is maybe not that bad experience. So we started to look into this. We looked into the past. We've seen how technologies that were magic originally could lead to all sorts of impersonal communications, and we didn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. And that brings us to the next lesson, which is starting with principles. So we looked around, and we've seen that there are lots of terrible interactions with bots. You've all seen this. There are all sorts of examples. When you start chatting to a bot and it doesn't understand you, it's not following, it's just stupid. It's stupid. Or like maybe a slightly better example, Lark is a fitness app which I really like. I think they're great. They're fantastic. But if you look at the interaction that is happening on the screen now, I'm reading text, and they tried to avoid the stupidness. They don't allow me to type. They only allow me to click one of the buttons. And these buttons don't present me with a lot of choice, to be honest. It's just, yeah, I'm still there. I'm still reading what you're saying to me. Got it. OK. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, I'm still here, yeah. This video can go forever, by the way, so we'll not look at it. So there is a fantastic website which you probably have seen, and in case you can't see the URL on top, it is chatbot.fail, which collects these examples of terrible bot interactions. I think it's great. You should absolutely look at it. Look. So we've seen terrible interactions. We've also seen lots of confusing identities. Imagine that you just go to the website and you start chatting to you want to chat to a company. You open the live chat, and then you can see something like this. You can see an avatar, which shows a female with a headset. What is really happening there? Who is behind? Is it really a female or a male? Is it even a human, or is it a robot? We don't know. Especially because this particular picture looks very much from a photo stock. You can probably tell that it's fake, and that's not the real person you're talking to. So there's someone else behind this. Not a great experience. In fact, yeah, it came up to the point when we've seen lots of fantastic counterexamples. Our own customers, Citizen M, they put a message using Intercom saying that, hey, please talk to me. I'm not a robot. Or another customer of ours from the School of UX told, I'm not a bot. I'm real human. Yes, this is my photo. It's not someone from the photo stock. It's me. Speak to me, please. I'm here. I think that's fantastic. One of the good examples, actually, of identities was with the Quartz News app, which they just renamed to Quartz Brief a few days ago. It delivers you news in the form of a conversation, and what's interesting is that there is absolutely no identity here. There is no avatar, so you don't know. You can't even think whether it's bot, email, female, male, it's just something. And it's a very subtle tone of voice. It mostly just delivers you news. And I think for their use case, it works really well, and I think it's a good example of having very subtle personality that doesn't stand in front of what's meaningful there. So we've also seen lots of expectations, wrong expectations. For example, we started testing our own bot at a website, which was a fake website of some company, and we started by being really nice and by introducing the bot. So we thought the bot should introduce itself, should clearly say, I'm a bot, I'm here. But what was surprising is that when we did a user testing, the majority of participants were really disappointed. And we were asking, why? What's wrong? What's the problem here? It turns out they have very different expectations. When they see that something identifies itself as a bot, they immediately start to think that two things. First, it can be super stupid, damn terrible bot, and they just don't want to have this interaction at all. Or it can be something like a fantastic assistant from the future, like from this Her movie that Cheryl just showed us before, which was, of course, wasn't true as well. So both of these expectations were misleading and not really true. And then we tried to tone this down with just playing with language, just removing all sorts of identification and go straight to the point and tell people what they needed to hear here in this example. And it actually worked much better. Surprisingly, now people didn't have these expectations. They were just interacting with the system, and it worked much better. So we start coming up with principles. And I believe that this is how we should start every design project. And the principles is a set of things that you believe. They should be opinionated, by the way. And every principle should have a counterexample, which would also be true for someone else. That's what makes them great and really opinionated. Because if you use a counterexample and it doesn't make sense, then you don't have a principle. You just have a truism. It doesn't make sense to have it. So these were our principles of bot design. First, you need to make it always clear that it's a bot. And it's interesting that now it's law in California. But when we invented it, it wasn't the case. So I'm glad that we were in line here. Then we thought that function is more important to us than a character. We want to make sure that we use only a simple and carefully crafted language. With every word, we understand what expectations would it set. We never interrupt when a human is typing. And if a human doesn't engage in this conversation, we just stop it. We don't try to re-engage them. So that was ours. And yeah, as I said, you can flip it, and it'll still be true for someone else. So the result was a super restricted bot. We even called it an introverted bot. It was really, really simple. For one of the examples here for Framer, all the phrases that were on screen, Framer typically replies in a day. A few more details will help you get to the right person. They were all crafted by us. The whole experience was crafted by us. It wasn't possible to tweak it. It wasn't possible to customize it. The guys from Framer had to use what we provided because we believed that this will create a better experience. In fact, the only thing that they could change was what data to collect. Like in these examples, they are collecting email as a first step, and then there are some more data sets, and this is what we showed them on their site. They can just choose 4 pieces of data they want to collect, and we'll take care of everything else. The phrases, the flow of the conversation, it's all on our side. And it worked well. It worked well for a while, but here comes the next chapter. You need to talk to the customers. That sounds very obvious. Of course, we all do. Of course, we all understand that we need to talk to the customers. But let me ask you one question. And this is a question that was first asked by my colleague Paul Adams at a conference in London earlier this year. As designers, do you talk to multiple customers or users directly every single day? Because we, as designers, we believe that we are the voice of a user. We are advocates of the users. But do we really talk to them directly, every day? I certainly don't, because I need time to design. I need to work with my designers. I don't do this. But there are people in our company who do it. Our sales team talks to our customers every day. And so does our support team. They really do. And they talk to understand what are the problems, what are confusion points, how people use our product. So we are obviously not the only voice of the user. And at Intercom, we try to speak a lot with customer support and sales. We even do such thing which is called a customer day, when everyone at a company for a day works as a customer support representative. So you are replying to customers' questions. I think it's phenomenally great. It's super useful. It's extremely useful for us also because we use Intercom to support our customers. We are using our own product, so it's useful in all sorts of ways. So we talked to our sales and support team, and what they told us is that businesses wanted to customize everything. Framer wasn't happy with the texts that we provided. They wanted to use different texts. And they wanted to use a different flow, and they wanted to use different apps. They wanted everything different. Of course, we don't just blindly follow what our customers are asking, because they're not experts in the solution. They might be experts in their problem, but not in how to solve it. And we try to start from the first principles. We ask why multiple times. But we really understood that businesses are very, very different, and they have very different needs. And the needs of Framer are not the same as the needs of 10% Happier, the meditation guys. They're very different, and they need different experiences. And we started asking ourselves, maybe we need to design a bot builder. So we crafted this little bot. It's very nuanced and restricted. It's tactful. We are sure it's great. How can we now create a tool that will allow businesses to build these bots for themselves while still keeping our principles? Wasn't an easy task. So we started to look around at how different bot builders are organized. And we found that there are two most common approaches. First was something like a visual diagram builder. And you're all familiar with this. It's like when you are drawing a decision tree or a tree of a conversation. It can have branches, it can go different ways. And you probably are recreating this in the product. So the UI should be a diagram builder. An alternative approach was something like a go-to model, when at one point at a time, you are just crafting one single node of the conversation. And for example, you're putting some chat bubbles, and then you put buttons, and when people will click the buttons, they will go to other parts of the flow. And then you can also go to this other part and also work on it in isolation. And of course, as people who, like everyone who understands something about engineering is usually freaked out by the go-to model, because it can go wrong in all ways, and programmers are no longer using go-to mostly. You can create some loops, you can create dead ends, it's very hard to control, it's unpredictable. So there are lots of drawbacks here. Does it mean that we need to use a diagram? We actually decided to try something slightly different and try to combine the go-to with the visual part with VisiVig. And we decided that we just will split the screen in two parts and we'll put a navigation, so we'll show all the nodes of the conversation linearly, as if it's linear, but even if there's some branching, we can still allow it. And then once the one is selected, we will provide an editor for this. So that's how the actual UI looks like. It may actually look pretty complex and maybe even overwhelming at first, but once you understand it, I think it works well. And you can craft some text, you can have buttons that go to different destinations, or you can click on that destination on the left in the nav, and it'll bring you to that destination, and you can then craft whatever the message should be there. So it worked. It worked for our customers. We tested it. It worked fine. But it only worked fine for just building the conversation. But people don't want to talk to businesses to just have a conversation. This is what friends are for. People wanted to do something. They wanted transactions. We noticed it from our own data. We also knew about Slack that the vast majority of their teams are using different integrations with other tools. So we needed to build some transactions. And all transactions in the conversational UI are also extremely complex, and this is where most of the bots break. Luckily, we had a framework in our own Messenger, the apps framework. So people could build the apps for themselves, and we already have tons of them. And these apps are little cards that can be sent in the conversation, and they encapsulate all the complexity of a transaction. Like if you need to process a payment from someone, you can just insert a Stripe app, and it has this all like provide your credit card details fields. It has all the validation built in. You don't need to build it all in the chat flow. And it actually worked really well. So we just combined this. The bot goes through the flow, and then when it's necessary to have a transaction, it provides you with an app, and it works really good. So we thought that we nailed it. Not really, because then the next chapter arises, and it's about the tech. We again looked at all the questions that people ask the businesses. And it turns out that people ask lots of very similar questions. Here are, for example, some of the questions that people ask us at Intercom. Well, maybe some of them are not even questions, but anyway. If you look at them, we can see that some of them are actually can be clustered in groups. For example, those three how to remove a teammate, can I delete a team member, where to manage teammates. That's essentially the same question. It's just asked with different words, but it's the same question, and there's just the same answer to all this. And we thought, what if we use machine learning to try to cluster all these questions and then provide great answers? And then we will teach our bot to actually understand a little bit of a natural language and provide these answers to the questions. And we started doing this. So from an end-user side, it looked pretty good straight away. Someone could start a conversation with a business, and then the bot will come, and in a normal way, it will say, OK, the team is not here, but they will be here soon. Here's the answer to your question. That's pretty great. People don't need to wait. They will get answer immediately. And we can, of course, provide them with buttons if they want to have more answers. If this is what they're looking for, great. They can talk to us and say us that it's done, and we'll close the conversation on our side. Or they will have explicitly an option to wait for the team to call a human, like an escape hatch, to not be stuck within this bot flow. So it was pretty straightforward on the end-user side, but it wasn't straightforward on the teammate side. How do people within the business create it? Because you need to teach the system. With every machine learning system, you need to teach it. And that means that the system will look at the whole bunch of your conversations and will try to cluster it, but there will be mistakes. Sometimes there might be false positive. They will have some conversations that are not really related to this subject, so they're by mistake added to it. Or it may miss some conversations. So there needs to be a human who would need to correct it and make sure that these questions to really represent the same subject, and then probably also craft a nice answer. But how can we do that so that the person who works on creating these answers would not be necessarily a machine learning expert or even an engineer, just a normal people from sales or support or from marketing? How can we make sure that the system is easy enough for them? We started working with engineers, and this is where it's important for designers to get really deep into tech. And we've seen that typically the cycle is like this. For every single question, we will first, and that's, I think, on top here, provide different suggestions of what we think are similar questions. And then someone would need to manually select the questions that really match and see these training examples. And then we can also try to estimate how this will work and show other questions that will match. And we'll even can try to predict how many of the conversations will be covered by this question. And then you will get back, and the whole feedback loop starts again. So you'll need to then maybe correct something, add more questions, and so on. But that's pretty complex. We don't want to build the UI that will represent this. What do? We decided to try to scope it down to a really small thing and try to get rid of everything that is unnecessary or will not significantly move the needle. And we ended up with the UI that looks like this, where you just put one question, and then we'll show you 3 questions that we think are matching. And you can manually say that, yes, this is the same question, or not. No, it's not. And if you do so, like if you select one question as matching, we'll show you the progress that, yes, that's great, but you need to keep training the system. And we'll bring you another question there. And that's just it. And after you play with the system for a little while longer, and after the training, you'll select enough examples for us to be sure that we reach our level of accuracy, you can then start typing the answer. So we tried to make it look simple, even though there is a complex technology behind. And it worked. We tested AnswerBot for a few months in our beta, and it was able to resolve 92% of the most common questions on average, which I think is pretty good. So that brings us to that we need to make the tech look simple. Finally, if we bring it all together and think about, and we just launched this AnswerBot a few weeks ago in October, so it's a very early stage for it. Even though we tested it throughout the whole summer, we'll still are curious to see how it evolves and what will happen next. So what is actually next, and what do we need to do about the future? There are just a couple of things that I wanted to speak about here. First of all, we are communicating now not in the same way we did before, and this will keep changing. Imagine this, remember these examples with phones or emails. Messaging will also change. One of the examples is emojis, for example. We use them a lot these days. But it wasn't obvious even to us that we need to introduce emojis to business communication. When and they weren't originally available at Intercom, and when someone decided that, what if we bring emojis? People were really unsure. Are you sure that you need to send a poop emoji when you're speaking to a bank? Will it make any difference? But on the other hand, this is how we communicate. This is how we people speak to each other. So we thought that, yes, let's give it a try. Even though there was no data suggesting we need to do it, let's just try it. We believe that this is how people communicate. And it was great. Now I can see even some sophisticated science reports of what are the most typical emojis that people use in business communication. That's pretty amazing. So the way we communicate will definitely keep evolving. Emojis are just one thing. These are already what we have. Maybe the future will look like us speaking using video. I don't know. Or maybe we'll be using mostly voice. It will definitely keep changing, and we need to adapt to this and keep changing our products to stay in line. Another thing that will keep evolving, of course, will be automation. We all know that before, cars were built by humans. But now cars are mostly manufactured by robots. Today, cars are driven by humans. But again, we all know that very soon the cars will be driven by robots. So it's obvious that robots and humans will work side by side, will live and work together. So what do we do to make this a nice experience and not repeat the problems of the past? How do we make it great? I think actually Cheryl's talk before was just the answer to that question, so I can't add anything else to this. I will just stress one little point that I particularly find really important. I think it's a handover between humans and robots. Because again, in our case, in the conversation with the business, you might be talking to both bots and humans on the other side, and I think this handover is what we haven't solved yet. Maybe what we as a humanity has not solved yet. You can start chatting to a business, and you will just see their identity, their logo, and again, you don't know whether it's a human or a bot. We believe that it should be very clear that it's a bot, actually. If it's a bot, you're speaking to a bot. And if you have a simple question, you can ask it, and you will get an answer immediately. But if you have a complex question, and if you want to speak to a human, you should be able to do so. And then when you're speaking to a human, you should also understand that this is a real human, this is a real face and name, this is who you're speaking to. Maybe this will make the future a little bit more bright. Anyway, I think this is what we can think about the future. The very last point that I want to make. Yeah, we looked into the past, and I think it's very important for designers to know what they're building upon, like what was the past of what you're working on. We decided on the principles. We shipped to learn, and we learned a lot after we shipped and after we speaking to our customers. We tried to make the next leap by introducing the new technology and tried to understand how it works and make it simple for people. And then we tried to be mindful about the future and make sure that bots and humans can work together in a nice way. There's just one last thing that I wanted to add. If anything of this looks interesting to you, please send me an email. I'll be super happy to talk to you more about it. We're also constantly searching for great designers. So if you're interested about these challenges, please email me. And with that, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Kostya. So I've got questions. And I'm going to, a whole bunch of them piled in the last 2 minutes, so I'm going to try to parse my way through it. There was one that just kind of jumped out immediately is, how do you actually usability test? Can you use some of the traditional methods that you use, but how do you actually test a usability test?
Yeah, we do it in a pretty traditional way. We just hire participants, and we sit with them at the computer, and they try to do something. And yeah, even if it's a conversation with a bot, like maybe the only, I'm guessing that probably part of the question maybe that is that traditionally you can use a prototype, you can use mockups, you can use wireframes to test it. In our case, of course, it needs to be a much more higher fidelity, and if it happens in the conversation, it needs to mimic this whole conversation patterns. But other than this, it's not vastly different from just a normal research.
Do you ever use, I'm going off script here, do you ever use any kind of almost like paper prototyping as a generative research method? Do you know what I mean? Like you have a person, what would you say? I'm the bot. What would you ask me?
To be honest, we haven't tried this. We haven't tried this. At Yandex, in my previous company, we tried to mimic the bot by just having a human on the other side. So there were humans who were pretending they're robots, and they were replying on as if they were robots.
Right.
That's what we did, but not the paper things.
Okay, cool. There's let's see. So what were some of the unexpected insights or maybe edge cases that surprised you when you're validating the chatbot?
Probably just this thing that may be very obvious to everyone, but that words do actually matter a lot. a ton. Like, you can just change one word and it'll flip the expectations, flip the way people understand it, present it. Like one example, we had a phrase that said, the person will be with you soon, to highlight that someone from the business will come soon. But turns out that people have very different expectations of what soon is. For some people, soon means, oh yeah, right now, okay, I'll wait where you are. For others, soon means never, maybe. And so we had to actually change it to, I think the last version that we used was as soon as they can, because we're a little bit, or like, yeah, I don't remember actually what we used, but the surprising thing to me was that words can be perceived in very different ways, and you have to be very careful when choosing specific words.
Do you localize? To what degree do you localize chatbots?
We mostly design it for English, and we localized it to a few languages that we localized our messenger for, I don't remember, like there may be 20 something languages.
So, okay, so along those lines, and so the reason I'm asking is I'm just sort of reflecting on this audience. I'm imagining, how many of you are native English speakers? So not very many, right? Yeah, right? Yeah. So, and I just sort of think about all of the subtleties of language. Like, I don't speak Hungarian, I don't speak Russian, so I have, there's no way I could understand all the intricacies of it. And so I'm curious how you adapt the language of the bots to all these potentially different cultures and things that are coming at you.
I think we've only started to understand how to do this.
Yeah.
I think we're not doing it in a way it's probably supposed to be done.
It seems huge, right? It seems huge to me, and I'm sorry to but I was like, that seems enormous along those lines. So, but kind of related to that is like, how do you also use language to make the bot feel warm and friendly? Like it's words on a screen, but how do you make it?
In our case, actually, I think the most important thing was that the bot has all the context and treated you as an individual. So it wasn't about specific words, it was more about this general feeling that, yeah, it has all the context, it knows who I am, it knows what I'm asking for, and even if the conversation is then handed over to a human, there is still the context goes to the human, and the human then understands what was before. So they knew what happened in the bot conversations. And that was this feeling that basically trying to treat everyone as an individual, as a human being, rather than trying to be extremely polite or extremely warm, because I think it can also have different consequences and like...
Right, if it's too warm and too... Like, because I thought it was interesting too that California was going to do the I'm a bot.
Right. Or if, like, again, to Cheryl's point, if people are actually dissatisfied and they're very disappointed, and if they're in a terrible mood, and you're trying to speak to them in a warm language, maybe this is not what they would like to have at this moment. So we try to just use a neutral language wherever possible and just go straight to the point.
Yeah. So there's one question that just appeared in here, which is about emojis. And are they something that you anticipate just the human using, or is it something that you imagine the bot using as well to express emotion?
Oh, that's a great question. We haven't tried much, I think. Mostly our bot just uses language today. It probably will use emojis as well and GIFs and all other like more emotional ways of conversations, but doesn't do it today.
Yeah.
But that's a great question. I'm also excited to try and test it and research it and see how people perceive it.
Yeah. Cool. So someone else actually also asked is, how do you deal with situations that users are asking for more information about specific topics, so going like, say, 3 levels into a conversation, deeper?
Yeah, I think with AnswerBot, if you click for more answers, it will just provide you with some choices, and you can choose something, and then like usually there is a way to go deeper. Okay. But in many cases, I think it'll be we will still need to wait for a human to answer. So I think bots are great at providing very quick response to very simple and frequently answered questions. But then if it goes really deep and if you need to go deep in it, I think humans are still better for that.
Okay. I do have one clarification. Where did it go? You said the answer bot was 92% successful, but one slide said 29. Is it 92 or 29?
I think it was 29.
29.
I don't remember what was about 92.
I saw 29 as well. So
yeah, 29, yeah.
Go with 29, okay. Let's see, so we also have, so this one I'm gonna try to see if I can interpret it. So we saw some examples from Cheryl, and I think you had some too, about the degree to which Hollywood shapes the narratives and the kind of the expression of what it means to be a human interacting with a machine, like from HAL, and we saw Blade Runner. So what might be some of the existing debate about the impact of that influence on the design today?
That's a fantastic question as well. I think it's about actually, because we know, again, like we know from the past that every technology started with the best intentions, and we wanted to enable something that wasn't possible before. But over and over, it can lead to unexpected consequences. And I think just being mindful of that and trying to be as responsible and trying to predict it like to the best of our ability would be the answer to this. And maybe how to do this is another question which we are debating with colleagues and with everyone else in the industry. But to me, it's mostly there. How do we predict what will be the consequences of how we use technology and how we protect ourselves from using it for, I don't know, not the greater good.
Great. Excellent. Hey, Cheryl, or someone, do you see his gift right there? Actually, thank you. I forgot to bring it up with me, and I want to make sure that you get one. Let's thank Kostya Gorskiy for this wonderful, wonderful session.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.